So where does collective consultation come in? So there's a bit of a misunderstanding, I'd say, generally on the street about when do we need to collectively consult. And I'm getting questions that, oh, hold on, we've got to go through a redundancy consultation process lasting 30 days or 45 days, haven't we? Well, the answer to that is no, not unless you're making 20 or more, or proposing to make redundant 20 or more employees at one establishment redundant in a period of 90 days or less. So if you are looking at making redundancies of less than 20 employees, then collective consultation doesn't apply. If you are looking at making 20 or more employees redundant in a period of 90 days or less, then it does apply. If it applies, then your obligation is to inform and consult with appropriate representatives of the affected employees. And that consultation period must last for 30 days before the first dismissal, if you're looking at making 20 to 100 employees redundant, or for 45 days if you're making or proposing to make 100 or over employees redundant. So that is where collective consultation applies. Who are appropriate representatives? Appropriate representatives are trade union representatives if you recognise a trade union. If you don't recognise a trade union, then it's either an elected body of employees who are elected by the affected employees, or alternatively a standing body of employee representatives who have the authority to represent the affected employees in the workplace. So most employers are going to need to elect employee representatives, I would say, unless they've got a standing body or they recognise a trade union. There's quite complicated rules about electing employee representatives that I'm not going to go through today, because I understand that most of you are looking at making potentially less than 20 employees redundant. But if you do need assistance on that, just obviously let me know. Okay, so secondly then, if an employer is proposing to make 20 or more people redundant in 90 days or less, then they need to notify the Secretary of State using a form called an HR1 form. And the notification periods are the same as the consultation periods. If you fail to collectively consult in the way prescribed by the legislation, then you are exposing yourselves to a protected award claim, the amount of which is 90 days pay in respect of each employee. So it's quite a substantial award. So it's something that needs to be followed and complied with if this applies to your business. We're just going to have a look then at a couple of questions that have been received about collective consultation. So I think Eloise is going to read those and I will answer them. So I'm going to just stop my sharing now.
Great stuff, thanks Keeley. So one of the questions is, what's the best way to ensure that all affected employees in a collective redundancy process have access to an appropriate representative, that the consultation is effective, given that a lot of employees may not be in the workplace at the moment?
Yeah, and it's an interesting question. I think the main thing is we've got to accept that these processes are potentially going to take longer and be more difficult in the present climate, particularly because of employees working from home if they can, or being on furlough. Appropriate representatives, in my view, need to be taken off furlough. So once they are in place and once they've been elected, if that's the process an employer has to go through, then they need to be taken off furlough, because in order for them to properly conduct their roles as appropriate representatives, then they're going to be working and they're going to be working particularly hard, because they're going to have to discuss, consult and with both the affected employees that they represent, but also with the management as well. So they're going to need that time to do that, and they need to be off furlough to do it, in my view. And we need to make sure that all employees have got the appropriate equipment, IT equipment, to be able to discuss with their elected employee representatives and management where appropriate, to properly be able to be consulted with. So that's if they haven't got laptops, if they haven't got computers, we need to make sure that if we can, they're provided, or we bring them in for meetings, and we make accessible locations for them to have meetings with their appropriate representatives. But of course, we have to make sure we've got appropriate health and safety requirements in place, social distancing and everything else to be able to do that. And that falls on the employer to do. So yeah, we have to accept it's going to be more difficult, more intricate. We need to make sure that the employees have got the appropriate mediums to properly be consulted with, and we bring the appropriate employees, appropriate representatives off furlough.
Great, thank you. So can we rely on the special circumstances defence to shorten the time that we should spend on collective consultation?
Yeah, so this is a defence. So if an employer fails to comply with those periods of consultation, as I say, employees can bring, or their representatives can bring, that protected award claim. There is a defence to failing to follow that required period of consultation, and that's if those special circumstances apply that prevent the employer from complying with that duty. It's special circumstances. The threshold is quite high, and therefore, although it's arguable, even in insolvency situations, it's difficult. So the threshold is high, but yes, there is a special circumstances defence that could apply. Even if the special circumstances defence does apply, the employer still has to do something. It can't just sit there and say, special circumstances, I'm not complying. It has to do what it can. So it has to be able to show that it's taken reasonable steps to comply with at least some of the obligations, or all of the obligations, to the extent it can at that relevant time.
Right.